Welcome to this episode of the Agile for Agilists podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nelson, and with me as always is Drew. And Drew, what do we have going on today?
Oh, we've got some cool stuff going on today. Aside from our wonderful guest and the topic, Kevin McClure, we're excited that we've now got Agile for Agilist podcast stickers, officially licensed stickers from the Agile for Agilist podcast. And they're super cool. They should definitely be on the back of everybody's laptops and water bottles and whatnot. And so what we've decided to do is do a giveaway. So if you like this episode and love it, then give us a repost, use the hashtag AgileSticks and tag us in it, and we'll reach out to you and coordinate sending you out a sticker pack for free. And they're really, really cool. They're prismatic. Brad did such a great job with the logo. So get your sticker today.
Yes, get your sticker.
I'm going to pass it back to you, Brad.
Thanks, Drew. So with us today is a longtime friend of mine. We've known each other for, I believe, about 8 years now. His name is Kevin McClure. He is a product manager, product owner. He's been in the product space as long as I've known him. And so I'm going to let you finish introducing yourself, Kevin.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Drew. And the stickers are great. I have one on the back of my phone, actually. Saw Brad speak at a Google I/O event last week, and it was a great time. Yeah, I'd love to introduce myself. Thanks for having me on the show today, guys. I really appreciate it. First time doing a podcast like this. And, I want to go back a little bit in history of me a little bit. So Brad mentioned 8 years in product, being software development. I spent the first about 9 years out of college, graduated with a finance degree. I didn't want to do that. I actually wanted to be a CPA. For some odd reason, looking back, I kind of laugh at that. I was just like, I'm not like these folks. I just had more of a creative spark in me. And I've always been a creative person. And I kind of thwarted away from that because I was like, that's what I like to do for fun, right? That's what I do for enjoyment, to get myself out of any other loop that I'm in. But worlds collided and things have changed so fast that I'm really fortunate to be where I'm at today with the skills that I've learned, that I've gathered, the people that I've talked to, small and large companies that I've worked for. I've really got a wide range of exposure, I would say. So kind of grinding my teeth at IT sales, I learned to get out of my shell, talk to people, talk to strangers, beg them for money, essentially, right? But during that time, I really learned what it meant to have an IT data center, what that meant for the company, the business. It wasn't just about pushing product, right? I thought it was at first, but it really wasn't, right? It was just a line item on their budget list. And, I soon kind of outgrew that. I was like sick of selling other people's things. I said, you know what? My creative spark has left me again. And I wanted to do something different. And a friend of mine worked at Meyer. So Brad had mentioned that earlier. That's where him and I met. Said, hey, you should try this. You've been talking to me for a couple of years about something like this. And he's like, I don't know exactly what you wanted, but I thought this would interest you. So I said, hey, why not? Let's give it a try. I left a pretty comfy income from doing sales, took a huge pay cut. But you know what? I was like, that's what I want to do. It's exactly what I want to do, right? Is be part of a team, do something as a team, not just me going out there fighting the world. I wanted that camaraderie back and really just wanted to see what I could do using my creative sense, using my analytical sense as well from studying numbers for so long, right? I was like, oh, this is kind of a great combination of the two. So fast forward a little bit, I found myself now at Ford Motor Credit, a part of Ford Motor. We're the finance arm. I'm a senior manager in the digital experience team. So what that means is we're in charge of anything, mostly anything that's user-facing, whether it's a web, an app, anything in between, right? Anything you can really think of as, part of the organization that I'm part of today. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah. And when I was at Meyer with Kevin, so he joined as a marketing analyst, as he mentioned, that was when I first became a BA. And then we went through the transformation together. So he learned how to be a product owner as I learned how to be a Scrum Master. And so those bonds that you build when you're learning new roles like that and going through a transformation together are pretty strong.
I want to call something out actually that you said in your intro, because I kind of feel the same sort of way. I was supposed to be a photographer. If like 16, 17-year-old Drew got what he wanted out of life, I'd be, traveling around the world with bands and shooting amazing photographs. And I was super creative. And then I joined the Navy and I felt like there was no creativity anymore. And I kind of learned how to rewire what creativity meant for me. And so troubleshooting circuitry became creative for me. And now I do feel that being a coach, helping to move chess players across the board and working with other coaches and Scrum Masters and whatnot is really creative. I will say, and this might be a little incendiary, but I bet that Bernie, right? As much of a prick he was for what he did to the world, I'd be willing to bet that whatever the scientific or psychological or principles of like dopamine and whatnot that get released in my brain when I take an amazing photo, that when he was coming up with creative ways to part the world with their money and make himself more money, that it probably was the same sort of like dopamine triggers and whatnot from a creative perspective. So
yeah, I agree. Just look at Wolf of Wall Street as well. I mean, that guy did some bad things, but he bounced back, right? Like, think about how, even though he was on abusing substances and everything, but like even before that, I was just gonna say, like, no matter what you do today in this world, day and age, I think if you're not using some sort of creativity, it's problem solving. It's, I want to do this thing. How do I get there? Whether it's me painting an acrylic painting or drawing something out. My daughters ask me to draw things out all the time because they know I'm creative and know I'm an artist. So I'm like, sure, I'll do that for you, right? But yeah, I think in today's landscape, I mean, it's crucial to a skill set. Just because you're a software engineer, if you don't have any creativity, I'd be quite worried about my future.
Yeah, I think we're all creatives in that regard. And like when you were talking about like, you wanted to be a CPA, but it wasn't creative. Like I get that, like looking at spreadsheets and, balance sheets, and that to me doesn't feel very creative. But there are people out there who love doing that. And the point that I was trying to make is that what creativity is to one person is boring to another and vice versa, So
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
So how are you putting all of this in practice today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Drew. I think what I do in software, when I was a product owner for so long, right? And I was like, wow, I didn't know this job existed. And I didn't know, actually, when I joined, I didn't really know how much creativity I was going to be able to have, or like the freedom to do that. All I knew was, I get to work on a piece of software. I didn't really know the extent of what that meant until I really got into it. And, for me, I think it was honing in my eye for design. Going back, I was like, I always drew anything I wanted, anything that came to my mind, right? I was like, I'm going to draw it out, or I'm going to create this. But now it's like, I have some restrictions around it, some freedoms around it. But I think just being able to build that muscle of having a keen eye for what looks good, what resonates, what makes a good user experience, what makes a good user interface, right? Those are two different things potentially. And really now, like, if I fast forward to what I'm doing now, I mean, I have to come up with new ways of working because I am handling a lot of work. I'm handling a lot of people right now. I come up with something every day to make my life easier. I use Miraboard like it's a Bible to really visualize what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, sharing it with others. I don't keep information, right? I beg others to give me feedback on, what I've put together. So it's, besides that too, it's like building things for users. You have to try to put yourself in their shoes as well. You have to get a good sense. Like Brad always says, that you're not the customer, right? You have to really separate. That took me a long time to separate those things, but having the creative sense of, in the analytical sense too, right? Of people are visual people, and that's what they see. So it's creativity and design and making web apps and apps. I mean, it's almost your number one thing. How do you get their attention? So yeah, I've just learned over time to hone in that skill and still working on it, right? There's so many different methods and different ways of looking at stuff now. It's almost unreal.
Yeah, I think back to our time at Meyer, and I think we were very fortunate, like planets aligned at that time, and we had a lot of support. Kevin had a product management team that helped with some of the higher level stuff at that time. Is when he was learning. We had a lead UX person who was overseeing UX for the entire area, and we had designers on all of our teams. And so we had this really great support network. And for me, I know personally, I learned things through osmosis that I didn't even know I learned until I left. And then I got to the other companies, and Kevin and I also did the West Michigan family tour. We worked at all the privately owned Fortune 500 companies in West Michigan, and we've technically both left now. But you realize that most companies don't have that. And so being able to pick up those skills and make yourself more diverse, to me, is a game changer. And that's what I was thinking of when you were talking, Kevin, is like being able to take that training from those other people and understanding how that stuff puts together is so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think it's going to be a must-have on anyone's resumes going forward, no matter what position you are, to have that, build that muscle, have that eye, not just focus on just back-end things, but, how does this, I think that's just how the world's moving, right? In order to become more efficient, you have to have people that have diverse skills. That's a must now.
Yeah.
Visualization is so centric to everything that we do. I mean, the visualization of the flow of value, right, through a Kanban system and all the nested Kanban systems that are out there from a standpoint of like stories, features, and epics and things like that. Being able to sketch out both product workflows and agile transformation workflows and value streams, all of that. My tool of choice. I've always wanted to use Miro, but I'm heavily in bed with Lucidchart. So my whole day is spent like just sketching out things in Lucidchart as well. And I always like to say my super secret power is that no matter who I'm talking to about whatever concept, I'm able to quickly spin up a Lucidchart on the fly to be able to visually demonstrate what it is that I'm trying to help them to see in a way that works really well for them. I think like those kinds of skills are just huge for not just product developers, but coaches and Scrum Masters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So quick story about visualization and how I even got this job is I used Miro to get this job. They said, hey, here's a challenge. You're going to have to speak to a challenge. They didn't really give you much to go off from, but they said, tell us how you would make our loyalty better or have it exist in our organization. So, I used those skills that, honestly, Brad taught me a lot, on how to write user stories, how to break things down, how to think about the slicing. But what I put in front of those hiring managers, they were absolutely blown away. Not only just because it was visual, but the way I presented it, right? You got to have both of those things. You can't just have just a bunch of stuff and no organization, but really I just created a map of my brain. Essentially, I imprinted it on a Miro board and said, here's how I think through things. And I even told them that. I'm like, I'm exposing how I think to you guys, and they were blown away. They couldn't believe how thorough and how I walk them through each and everything that I thought of. And then even cooler yet is after that, after I got the job and the person that helped me get the job from Tech Systems, she heard about it and she was like, I'm going to make all my other candidates use this format. And Ford was out. I started getting calls and messages like, it was maybe a month or two later, but they're like, hey, I heard about your interview. So I was even more blown away that other people heard about my interview. I didn't share my Miro board. They just heard about it, right? And I don't know what they're doing today, but last I heard, they were like, we have to initiate something like this to filter people out because it gets them to strategically think and shows your passion for that job, that next role you want. I spent 3 days on it, 3 days straight. Maybe not everyone has that time necessarily, but I was like, I want this role. I'm going to sacrifice my time and really show what I'm made of.
When I'm in Lucidchart, right, or whatever the whiteboarding program is, I feel everything else just slip away. I have major ADHD. I say that in every single episode, but I'm saying it again because you're a new guest on this episode and maybe you haven't heard that. My ADHD just goes away when I'm using like Lucid Chart and I'm trying to map out and be creative and come up with the ways that things can flow together across multiple systems and things like that. And I don't think that everybody, again, like getting back to the idea of like some people like can sit there and looking at spreadsheets and feel like they're Michelangelo. Like that's the way I feel when I'm coming up with some greatness on Lucid Chart. And I iterate. Like sometimes I'll get halfway through and I'll just scrap it and open up a new tab and start from scratch and do it again. And I don't feel bad about that. I feel like supercharged.
Yeah. So something else you mentioned though, Kevin, was being able to present that. So being able to organize your thoughts on paper or digitally is one skill, but presenting it is a whole nother skill I found as well. Something that I think you can only learn from doing. And I'm still learning. Everyone's hearing it on the podcast all the time. Hopefully I'm getting better. Let me know. But I'm curious.
A thumbs up, a thumbs down.
Like you've learned a ton in sales, essentially cold calling people, having to be able to think on your feet.
Yep.
But something else that we don't talk about a lot is SAFE in general, the framework SAFE. And when it does come up, it's usually like, well, what is it missing or what is it not doing right? But one of the things that, and I'm curious your opinion on this, Kevin, that I think it may help as well is that you're constantly presenting as a product owner in SAFE. Every PI planning, you're presenting to a room. In our case, it was sometimes 150 people all the way up to the CIO. And then every sprint review, you're presenting to stakeholders that come to the team one, but then you also have the combined sprint review for the entire art as well. So do you feel like starting that way, like starting your career as a product owner that way, helped you become a better presenter?
Yeah, so I'll say this is that growing up and even into college a little bit, I would have stage fright. I would be all confident coming up there. I would start speaking, literally would just like forget. I would just blank out. Once I kind of found myself again, I'd be fine. But it kept happening. I was like, why is this happening to me? What am I afraid of? Why am I so worried about what these other people think? I think even when I joined Meyer, Brad, you probably even, you could be honest with me. Even looking back, like, I'm like, I don't think I did that great of a job at first, right? I think it took me a while to combine because I was so eager to know. I wanted to know everything day one. And I had to just slow myself down and be like, it's okay. It's okay you don't know everything. Present what you do know, and the rest will follow. If I fast forward, I think I'm even doing more presentations, but it's almost passive at this point. I do minimal prepping just because I'm so involved in what I'm doing. I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. And it seems like I can almost come into any meeting without looking at one thing and know how to talk about it. Because, when I'm not in a meeting, I am head down grinding on knowing my business. It's just like running your own company, right? Essentially, but for a big company, like you have to know your numbers, you have to know your people, you have to know what's going on in all aspects and all versions, right? If you treat it like it's your own business, you should be able to just fly into meetings and be able to answer any questions, right? For me, I think over lots of time, it's become much more natural for me. I don't get the stage fright I used to get.
That's another attribute that I hear a lot from highly successful product developers is that they do treat it like it's their own business. In many cases, they're sanctioned in looking at it in that way, but not always. But if they look at their slice of the product as their own business, that's another attribute I've seen. The other thing that you mentioned is, that you're highly keyed in, right, and grinding away in these moments of trying to figure out and learn more about your business. I'm assuming that either you have like some sort of virtual dashboard or actual dashboard or like the places that you're checking, right? Maybe you've got things bookmarked or maybe what does your dashboard look like for you? When you get back to your desk and you don't have a meeting for like another hour, let's say, and you want to learn more about your customer in a passive way, what are some of the tips and tricks and the tools that you use for that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I won't name it here, but I'm bringing on a CX platform in my current role, and my current team is called Digital Amplification. So how do I get to know my users? Is that we're spending a lot of effort and time to actually get to know our users by bringing on a piece of software that combines, it's a data aggregator that brings in data from these various sources that we use to give us these insights on user journeys, on page comparator. What is my pages actually doing from a speed perspective? What errors are on my page? So as it sits right now, the tool that I'm bringing on, I'm spending a lot of time there mapping out different things. I'm being both proactive and reactive because I'm now getting different areas of the org coming to me and saying, hey, Kevin, we can't figure this thing out. Just the other day, there was a team that said, hey, we heard you're the guy to talk to. We can't figure out why our abandonment rates are sky high. I mean, they're 30% more than they were last month. So I tasked my team to take a look at it. And we pivoted really quickly from our roadmap to bring on that group's pages into our system, right? We had some setup to do and we're now collecting data. So things like that, I mean, that's kind of what I'm building here is ability to pivot and react quickly and not have to log into 15 different systems to figure out what my users are doing, what the systems are doing. It gives you that full picture.
It sounds like the answer is you're building that dashboard, which is actually really, really cool.
Essentially, yeah, it's going to be a self-service in the future until everyone gets trained up on it and understands how to use it, how to look at their stuff, how to look at the overall picture of what your customers are doing, right? So this tool will bring us closer to our customers. It doesn't say like Brad came in, it's a unique ID, but from a generic standpoint and the feature sets that we're working on, we're here to inform those product teams what you should be focused on, how to prioritize. And that's another piece I'm working on, right? Is governance and intake, portfolio intake, and being that data-driven company that we want to be. Everyone says they are, but they really aren't until you have that complete full circle from output to back to input. Like your designers and UX folks should be also using this tool to start feeding back into those product teams, right? From the metrics and the user analysis, what people are actually doing on your site.
One of the things I'm thinking about now is, we always talk about the idea of a test first mentality. And so we want to create test cases first. But like what you're talking about, right? We're also supposed to create user journeys first as well. Mm-hmm. Not everybody does that. But I feel like a tool like you're building could be the starting point where right now maybe it's being looked at, and maybe I'm wrong too, but it's being looked at potentially as the end point. The end result of what we've just built is now to grab analytics from it. But you could theoretically build your user journeys within a tool like this, which then would allow you to then measure those user journeys as they get released to production right away. Kind of like if you're using like Gherkin, or was it Cucumber and Gherkin?
Yep.
But I think like
that's a good point you're bringing up. Yeah, I didn't even think about that angle of it. And the only thing I can think of here is that, we have a QA environment in my tool, is that we have QA sites, right? That we're bringing in those QA URLs. It's mostly internal people, but theoretically, like you said, though, you could do a canary release if you set up the right environment and start looking at a subset of folks and what their behaviors are, and before you because we do A/B testing, we use tools for that. In this tool I'm bringing in, actually, you can view those A/B tests side by side within this tool. But I do like your idea, Drew. That's something to consider for sure.
Yeah, it was I don't know what triggered it when I was thinking about, I think it's the idea of like how, being able to see where people travel across a page. I've been involved in an effort using a similar, but probably nowhere near as sophisticated off the shelf product called Zoho Sales IQ. Have you ever used Zoho or heard of Zoho?
Heard of it.
Yeah, it's good for what it does, and it's a great stepping stone for smaller companies, but they've got this product called Sales IQ that embeds directly into your website. And so like when people show up on your website, you could literally see real time that somebody with this IP address. And if they're registered in the system as a customer, then you can see exactly who they are and be able to watch them move through your website. And if you set up the proper user journeys in there, right, and it's not called user journeys in that regard, I forget what it is from a marketing perspective, You could see how they're moving about your site, whether or not they're moving on the cow paths as intended or creating their own. And I don't know. Anyhow,
Yeah,
that's really
journey
cool,
analytics is another term for it, right? Maybe that's what marketing uses, but at least that's what my tool states that it is. It's journey analytics. It's both visual and data combined.
It's pretty interesting. It makes me think of my best friend presents on UX a lot. She's
I was your best
user
friend.
experience. She's very sorry. What?
I said I thought I was your best friend.
You can be my best friend in New York.
Okay, how about that? I'll do that. Who you podcast with?
My podcast best friend. My best friend of all my podcast partners.
Sorry.
So she's an amazing UX person, and she always talks about the maturity of an organization in regards to UX, and it aligns a lot with product. And so we've done some presenting together on like product and Agile and UX. But she talks about how like the highest maturity of an organization is when UX is driving the decisions. Like UX is driving what we're creating. And I think that's the same with product. And Kevin mentioned like being proactive and reactive. And that's what kind of triggered me there is like from a product standpoint, how do we shift from we're throwing something out to the masses and seeing whether or not it was successful or not, and instead we're deciding what we build based on what our users are doing.
Yeah, I think there's like a middle ground there too, right? I think any smart enough organization, like I don't know what the folks at Tesla are doing. That's one of our obviously bigger competitors in this new space of EVs, right? That we're chasing after. But you make a good point, Brad. I think you and I always talked about this at Myers. Like just because that users are asking for it, that doesn't mean that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact solve of that, but I do know if I go back to what I'm doing, the proactive versus reactive is one of the features of what I'm doing is enabling our software engineers to, it's called shift left approach, where typically, as it sits right now, even in probably most organizations, the business is always the one tapping on the IT folks saying, hey, what is wrong with your systems? We're seeing a spike in calls on this particular issue. There has to be something wrong with the IT backend systems, right? The fingers are always pointed there. And what mine's doing is taking that behavior out of the equation, essentially, because if all goes well, these software engineers will be armed with this tool. They could set up AI alerts or even manual alerts to alert them of variances within their pages, their app. So if it is a technical issue, they should be telling business, hey, we've spotted the spike. I mean, we have all these systems, right? Today, we can see this stuff today, but it's a matter of time. It's a matter of effort to get to this data. And that's where this is coming in is, we've had some tough conversations, in the beginning here, like, well, this is just another tool. Why don't we use Adobe? I'm like, we do use Adobe and we're going to continue to use Adobe, but I can integrate with Adobe now and bring in Adobe segments and compare that to what we're seeing on the actual site themselves. Like what Adobe's tracking versus my tool's tracking everything. It's a scraper essentially. But the goal really of the organization is to just identify things before they actually happen, before they become an actual problem. That our call center, like our one of our tools was down and just the other day, and it affected everyone. They couldn't log in. I'm sitting there looking at video replays. They're super frustrated, right? We call it rage clicking because things were timing out. Found out it was a global error. But what I did with my team, I said, hey, this is already in the past. I get that. But what does our data show? Now that I know that there was this outage, it's a little after the fact, but I'm like, we have to be prepared in the future to be before the fact. So I'm like, let's do an analysis on this. This is a good practice. What is the data telling us, right? And I was able to produce a report in a half a day and send it off to a few people. We're still trying to perfect the process, but I said, hey, here's a sampling of our work. I'm getting you guys used to hearing from us. This is what we could do in the future when everyone's onboarded to this. It's supposed to take out the guesswork, essentially, right? Between all these gaps that exist, as you guys probably know, working in product for so long or anywhere really in technology. So many gaps exist from point A to point B. From an executive saying, I want this thing, go find it for me, right? Like most of the time it takes 3 weeks to 2 months sometimes to put all this data together, and then to have someone analyze it, and then have someone present the results back, and then to make the change is probably 60, 80 days, 100 days out. So we're trying to just really speed up the time to production. And in order for it to get in production, we're also working on a whole digital transformation right now, where Brad mentioned earlier, we're bringing on Safe Agile. So we're trying to get the framework in place. We're replacing legacy systems that are 20 plus years old. We're using the latest and greatest technologies. We're venturing into some areas that no one's even seen before. Not outside of our organization, but people that are working for us are like, we have no idea. We've never done this before. We're really just challenging and making them stretch. We have to get to this point where if you're just bringing on technologies that are just kind of so-so, right, it's going to take 2 years and you're already behind. So we're really just putting an investment in right now to just really prep us for the foreseeable future. It's quite interesting.
That's really cool. And one of the things that you said is striking a chord with me as well, shifting things left again. At a company I was at a little while back, one of the things that I helped them to do from a coaching perspective was shifting things left, but also at the same time shifting things right and narrowing the gap between the left and the right. And so the CI/CD pipeline at the time when I got there supported dark releases and, canary and A/B testing and whatnot. But in order for a release to occur, it had to be done by a developer. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we built a dashboard for our internal customers so that this way the person who had requested the new capability or feature or whatnot that was developed was responsible for making the configurations through a graphical user interface that said, all right, I want to release this new feature dark so we can test it out internally, or I want to release it to just a subset of this type of users or this type of customer and whatnot. And one of the reasons why we're doing that was we found that what was happening was that we would get ready to do a release, but the people who were sitting all around the left were not ready to roll it out yet. And they were getting upset, and there was testing that was still going on. And by giving them the control to oversee doing those releases and being the one to press the button to saying release, we found that we drew them in closer. We shifted things left, but at the same time, we also drew them in a lot closer. And I like the idea also of like a self-service tool. Like before I left, we were at a place where we were trying to create self-service analytics and things like that as well. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge change, and fortunately, I've been really given autonomy and power to initiate this change. With change, people don't like change, and I've had a lot of resistance. But I'm just learning to spread the good word, but I'm not going to pressure people to use it. It's going to be starting to become I don't know what you call it. Sort of the rumor now. It's like, well, yeah, we've been on a couple meetings. We heard about your tool. Whoop-de-doo, right? We can do this other stuff. But like I mentioned earlier, now people are coming to me, and they're like, yeah, we're having these bigger meetings, and now we're really hearing about your tool. And, they're getting challenged by executives. Why aren't you using that tool then? We're spending all this money. I'm not working in a vacuum here, right? I didn't make this decision. The decision was made prior to me coming in, and I didn't know anything about it. But, after I've seen the power of it, I'm just like, wow, I wish I could have had this when I was a product owner. This would have been great for any meeting that I had, because everyone's always asking for data. They're like, Kevin, we don't want your opinion. We don't want your bias. Brad, we don't care about your opinion. How do you back up your claims with actual user journeys? So like last year as a product owner, I spent a lot of time in Adobe, a lot of time in this other tool called Mouseflow. It just really didn't give you the full picture. And it was hard to set up dashboards, I felt like. And it was sort of bias setting up dashboards. It's like, well, I can make a couple changes here and there and get the result I want. It seems fine. But now, with this tool that I'm bringing in, it's zero bias. It's capturing everything that user is doing. There's no question on what they did.
I think that also sometimes people are measuring the wrong thing. I watched a video today. They were talking about some of the metrics that are being used to suggest that life is improving in the United States. And one of them was the number of guitars purchased. right? Which I thought was kind of interesting because they were saying that, all right, number of guitars purchased shows increased access to leisure. And the word that triggered me there was increased access to leisure. People have the access to purchase a guitar and they are purchasing guitars. And I thought that a better metric might be number of guitar strings sold. Because the thing is that you could buy a guitar, which means you have access to a guitar, but are you playing it? Are you breaking strings? Because if you're breaking strings, you're buying new strings. And that suggests that not only are people buying guitars, but they're playing guitars. Or number of students who are playing guitar in a high school performance or something like that. Or, but I feel like those metrics that kind of like shoot through the George Bush victory, we did it metric, right? And actually measure the efficacy of the success is a much better metric.
That reminds me a little bit of page views.
Yeah.
It's like more page views is good, but it doesn't tell me much.
Yeah, like that example I gave earlier, Brad, with that team coming to me saying, just to kind of circle back and connect that dot there, is that their initial request to me was like, hey, can you figure this out with your tool? Because we can't figure it out. I'm like, well, I can't guarantee or promise you anything, but I will onboard your pages. We'll take a look. And so I did some initial analysis on Adobe, and I sent it to the leader over there. I said, hey, this is interesting. I know you're telling me that abandonment rate's going up, right? You're getting more people abandoning your flow, which is part of our money-making system, essentially. I just dub it as that. Because we start losing people there, you can put a dollar value on those folks. So it's very important to us, even though we're not selling trinkets, we're not having like these Amazon checkouts, but you could still attribute, a certain amount of people that go through these flows will buy our service or product. But like it's a simple thing, but like I'm like, man, month over month the users are actually pretty decent. Like it's a pretty good uptrend. But yeah, you look at that other side of the metric, yeah, you're getting more people, but there's more people also abandoning, so like it's not a good metric, right? So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and so I don't usually like to use these acronyms, but what you're describing to me is ProdOps, or product operations. Like you're providing this tool, and I didn't think this conversation was going to go there, but by making it self-service, there's this concept in DevOps right now called platform as a product. And it sounds like you're essentially building a platform, and we usually think of platforms in like the hosting sense, but they're any tool that serves internally. Usually it's also pointed at developers, right? What's the DevX? But product owners are an internal customer. And so by applying that product mindset internally, how do I serve my customer, which is an internal person? It sounds like you're right in the brink there of building a platform.
I also think that, based on the discussion we had with Dom recently, Dom Michalik, the idea of a customer versus a user, your internal users are product people. And you mentioned this idea of how do I get them to use it, right? Some people are excited for it, others might not. And like what Dom was talking about from a behavioral product, and I'm going to butcher this one so bad. But he was talking about like the intersection of, I'm already butchered it, of like opportunity and need and like willingness, and motivation was not one of them, but it's the only word that I could think about
right now. It's like a prompt.
Do you remember exactly how we put it?
A prompt or a trigger. Yeah, so when someone's prompted to do something. I also didn't think about it when Dom called, but there was this book when we were at Meyer that was circulating the leadership team called The Mobile Mindset. I think is what it's called, where it's essentially like, how do you capture in the moment? People's needs are fleeting, so like you have to capture it in the moment. And I think that feeds into the BJ Fogg approach of what is the prompt, and then what is the action? And then how do you reinforce that?
I also think this one, I'm covering the title, The Cold Start Problem by Andrew Chen, all right, where he talks about the idea of like, how do you start a social network when you have no users on day one? And that could be really interesting to kind of figure out how to, essentially your dashboard is going to be at some point, or if it is already, so to speak, social network that you want everybody in your company to log into and socialize on around the idea of learning more and more and more about our customers, highlighting insights about them, and getting to that tipping point where it becomes habitual for everybody in there. Like that, when I asked you the question earlier of what's your dashboard, like your virtual dashboard look like? What do you check every single day during those like hour-long moments where you want to learn more about your customer? You want your tool to be the product that every one of the product owners in your company goes to on a daily basis to check their fantasy football stats.
Check their product reels, right? Product stories. That's a great... I'm going to start using that, Drew. I'm going to steal that from you, okay? Because, I mean, this whole world is so addicted to social network, but I didn't think of my product in that sense. And I really like that lens on it, though, right? Because just like anything else, right, our attention spans are just smaller and smaller and smaller every day. And I think some people are spending like 5-6 hours a day, I heard, in some senses, right, on social media networking. But, you know, as far as how my tool is viewed, it's really to go in there. I mean, it shouldn't take you long to understand your product, but it's a minute here, a minute there. I can quick go get answers, right? But socializing that out to the rest of the company to make changes. My gears are turning on that one. I really like that.
You could gamify it too. Like if you had certain product owners that own certain product journeys, like the metrics could be common across them, and like you could have leaderboards from whose customer journey is outperforming the others. You could then have the ability, like, you know how like you can go onto platforms and vote for like ideas that you want to support. You could allow, voting for the journeys. You could also have people provide comments and internal comments and feedback to say, hey, I've reviewed this journey. I think it's wonderful the way you're setting it up, but I've got an idea for how you could tweak it, kind of like the way that like back in the day when people were doing XP and whatnot, when they were putting comments on people's commits and other things. And the number of comments on a person's commit or the number of comments that a person gave on other people's commits was a metric to say that like, I'm a great community developer. People like commenting on my code, and I like to comment on a lot of other people's code.
Oh, that's great. I feel like that would be a good driver for people to kind of wake up too.
Yeah. And that gets back to also, we were talking about, I think it was before we started recording, and we were talking about the idea of that new role of a products op director or whatever. That's exactly why I would love to be in that role. Like I love working with product developers and like listening to what they're trying to do and bouncing some ideas off them, seeing which ones stick, and then helping them to like look at how are you going to organize this into a backlog and start setting up your experiments and whatnot. So I think it's super exciting what you're working on. Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. So, you talked about earlier, Kevin, about how it's like owning your own business. And my interactions with you and a lot of our conversations tend to be around more of the Fortune 500 type large enterprises. And Ford is definitely there. Ford's been around for over 100 years. I don't think they're one of the oldest companies in the world or in the US, right? Because you have like Colgate, that's like 1800s or something. But they're definitely old compared to most companies. And so it's really cool to hear them innovating in that way and really trying to grow, especially because a lot of my talks talk about the innovation of Ford at the beginning and the assembly line of that. But thinking about what I do know about you is that you also dabble in the startup world.
I do. Yep. I can't claim I made much money on it, but the only thing I can claim is that I know how hard it is. I know what it takes. Maybe not to be as successful as I want it to be, but at least I've burned my antennas. I've grinded it out till 3-4 in the morning on certain things. I think my biggest thing was I want to see if I can do it. If I fail, I fail. At this point, I don't even care, because I even told my business partner, I said, you know what? I'm having fun just getting the experience of how to take an idea, actually create a physical product, and get it out in the market. Like, I've learned so much from that, and I'd have to sit down and think about the amount of things that I've learned from that experience that I actually apply right now. And I honestly think I could attribute some of my success where I'm at today, just the short time I've been at my current position, to taking that mentality, and it's just really a driving force to everything I do. Taking complete ownership. I heard a great quote just the other day. It's around how hard you work and the money you make. I might butcher it, but conceptually, it was basically saying that never mind the money. Stop worrying about the money. Work as hard as you can and do the best job you can, and you will get rewarded. Otherwise, you're at the wrong company, essentially, right? But even when you do get that pay raise, you still work as hard as you did prior, because you'll still continue that.
The reason why I kind of queued that up was I was going to ask, having full autonomy of your own business versus having stakeholders coming to you with problems, like which one is harder?
The stakeholders, I think. There's a lot of... I haven't really experienced it too much with it. Hard to get along with stakeholders. I try to get to know people more on a personal level first before I start talking business. And that's served me well. And that's really kind of encouraged here at Ford especially, but I think in anything in life, it's not all about business, right? Brad, this, the manifesto, right? It's people over process. And if all you do is talk business, you don't really actually get to know that person. What makes them tick? What annoys them? What discourages or encourages them? You don't want to directly say what discourages you, but you can roundabout get to those answers, right? By just, let's go have some coffee. Let's go grab a drink after work. Just stuff like that, right? Really putting out an olive branch and sticking up for the small guy. I think that I've always done a good job at that too, is, I just had an intern on board and he's already getting pushback on wanting to code. And I was like, no, we're going to do this. Like, I don't care if you're a student, if that's what you want to do for your internship, I'll make it happen. So just that kind of thing. I just kind of laugh at. I'm like, people telling me no, I'm like, no, we'll figure out a way. Let's do it. That's going to make you fulfilled here in my department. Then I go, you're going to have the best presentation because I'm going to help you.
It's awesome. Yeah. And then I do want to give a shout out. I feel like we have to give a shout out now to your brother, Kyle. We were talking about this when I was in Grand Rapids. So, and I don't know how much he knows it, so Drew, you don't know Kyle, but he was Army. He is a pilot and he's got these amazing quotes. And through Kevin, these quotes have worked into my day-to-day vernacular. So when I say slow is smooth, smooth is fast, I got that from Kevin, and Kevin got it from his brother Kyle. So I just feel like we have to give him a shout out on this episode.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely send him the Spotify link. I'm pretty sure he uses Spotify. But we started using that back at Meyer. And the more you think about it, if you actually dissect what that means, right? Especially when it comes to, and I'm hoping we can get Kyle on this actually, Drew. I think he has a lot to say as well. He's a 20-year veteran, been overseas. He's a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. He still is a helicopter pilot today for a hospital, Kalamazoo. So, when he actually broke that down for me, is when it comes to his job, lives were actually on the line, right? I'm not saying what we do, lives are actually on the line. But yeah, if you work for a health system, they really are, right? If you're doing software for that. But yeah, he was like, if you rush and hurry, people do die. But if you take your time and actually think about it and move just a little slower than you were before, you're not going to tip things over. You're not going to push the wrong button. You're not going to make these knee-jerk reaction decisions. In his line of work, again, could hurt or kill people. So it's really remarkable, some of his stories.
I'm a huge fan of the military, being a Navy veteran myself. I think that life doesn't always have, when life is on the line, it's easier to see your purpose. It's much easier to see your purpose when it's your job to deliver a heart transplant from, some one location to another. But when livelihood is on the line, when you're issuing loans, a person's livelihood is on the line. And I was at the Business Agility Conference a couple of weeks back. They were talking about how Roche Pharmaceuticals has shifted the way that they work. Everybody at that company should be able to answer the question of what is your purpose, right? Not what is your job, what is your job function, what is your title, but what is your purpose? And their purpose is connected to an end user who you're serving value to. And that the salespeople are no longer selling products, they're selling outcomes that enable people to have better lives. So Roche, they sell diagnostic equipment and pharmaceuticals and surgical tools, and they no longer will just sell one piece of that value stream of a patient who might have an affliction. They have committed to, we want to serve the entire end-to-end outcome of getting that person healed, right? So they can have improved livelihood or retain their life, right? Or however you say it in the pharmaceutical world. But so for a metric from a standpoint of finance, companies are a little bit short-sighted. What percentage of money are we making each year on selling this financial product? That's a short-sighted metric. That's one that serves the banking industry, but it doesn't serve the customers. So a better metric would be, we are selling X type of financial loans or whatnot to a persona that has a farm, or a persona that wants to start up a healthcare company or a daycare or something like that. And the metric that you look at is, in my region for where I'm selling, if I own small businesses that are focused around daycare or something like that, are parents having a reduction in cost for daycare, right? Are parents seeing that their children are having improved learning upon entry into kindergarten and stuff like that? Those are the kinds of outcomes-based metrics that, if the world was a just and fair place, everybody would be using those kinds of metrics instead of did I hit my commission for this year?
Mm-hmm. It's exactly the reason why I got out of sales, Drew.
Yeah.
I was sick of that carrot, right? You got punished for having a really good year. You're like, well, you did so good that we're just going to double your goal next year. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense if I look at my history of, obviously the goal of sales is to keep climbing, right? But I got to a certain point where I just didn't care anymore. I was like, I really don't care. I'm making enough money. But that's when I decided I needed to get out, because I didn't care anymore. I'm like, it's not good for this company.
If the carrot was connected to improving little Jimmy's life or little Cindy Lou Who's life or whatnot, right, you might still be in sales, because you'd be able to be making great money and at the same time knowing that my purpose here isn't just to hit a number. My purpose is to improve somebody's livelihood.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, I would love to set up an episode with your brother for sure, because coming from a military background, topically speaking, leadership is absolutely there.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was a captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, he dropped a gem on us when I was up there, and there's no rank in the cockpit.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
That's a good point.
That was a great one.
When you're in that kind of situation that at any point in time, a failure could happen, right? Someone could get hurt, someone could pass out, it's like you have to all jump in. You're all a team, regardless of if it says captain or grunt or whatever. Is that kind of the point you got to, Brad, from him saying that? Or
yeah, I think what I heard was that everybody has a valuable opinion and everybody is seeing different things. And so it doesn't matter if you're not the highest ranked person in the cockpit. If you see something, you say it.
Oh,
because
okay.
that could be the difference between life and death. We don't want you to be shy and timid because, right, you're a grunt. That's okay. And I think that's the same thing in companies too. Hopefully it's not life or death situations, but the big wig enters the room and everyone shuts up.
That would be a very interesting principle to incorporate into your tool. The idea of that, anybody in the company should be able to look at the performance analytics for the customer journey so that anybody can provide the insight for what they're seeing, But this has been a really wonderful conversation. We don't talk enough about product on this podcast.
Thanks for joining us, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate the conversation and look forward to maybe doing another one in the future.
Let's bring Kevin
maybe
in.
you can get both Kyle and I on the podcast.
Oh, Kyle. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah,
Kyle.
Kevin and Kyle. Yeah, definitely. If you made it to the end of this episode, provide us your feedback at agileforagilists.com. I still cannot remember the name of that plugin, Drew. The little voice recorder on the side. Memo.fm. I'm a terrible... It's a good thing they're not sponsoring us because I never remember it. But Memo FM's on the side. Leave us a voice message. If you leave us a voice message, you may appear in an episode. We may just air the... We will. Drew says we will. Otherwise, write us, email us. We've been getting some great feedback, and we appreciate it.
Podcast@agileforagilists.com is our email.